Welcome you to this session where we'll be talking about nonverbal cues as it pertains to intercultural education and working in intercultural contexts. Cultural space is particular interest to us here as we think about nonverbal cues. For example, the quote here by Martin says that cultural spaces are the social and cultural contexts in which our identity forms. So based on this, how our identity is formed is how we view and look at nonverbal cues. And they're different, maybe the same nonverbal action, but it would have a different connotation or meaning depending on the culture in which you're working in. So during this session, we'll look at the different types of nonverbal cues. We'll look at body language, dress, personal space, and time. Body language, I think we can all relate to this with posture and how one's posture, if they're in a defensive position, arms crossed, and just or more of a happy-go-lucky attitude, free, kind of waving hands around. Posture is relaxed rather than a stiff posture. Communicates one thing versus a relaxed posture, doesn't it? Sets you at ease. Facial expressions can be very important too in body language, and how if you're, for example, when we lived overseas in Papua New Guinea, if you raised your eyebrows, that was like, and sucked in the air through your throat like this, like, and that would mean that you were in agreement. And it sounds like us like you're starting to suffocate, but for them it was agreement. And they didn't have doorbells over there, and so many times that you see the videos and things like that you might have seen on the Nature Channel or things like that, where people live in the huts and the grass thatched roofs, and rather than yell out, they would just clear their throat. And that would let you know that somebody was outside and wanted you to come out, more of a polite way to do it. And so we realize that other cultures have certain things like that as well. Facial expressions can mean one thing in one culture and another, obviously in a different culture. Eye contact, for many cultures, it's offensive to stare somebody in the eyes. In our culture, Western culture, I should say, America especially, if you don't, it's rude if you're not. It's like, well, how come you can't keep your eye? You're hiding something, kind of shifty eyes we talk about. Public displays of affection in many cultures is very offensive, Middle Eastern especially, but also in other areas. I know when we lived in New Guinea, women and men never held hands, but men could hold hands with men in public and walk down the street, and you'd see that, or I shouldn't say the street, but in the village or the jungle, you would see them holding hands, but never with their spouse or a lady. I put yawning in here because that was another interesting thing. When we think about yawning here, it means you're tired. For us, an example, in the culture we were in Papua New Guinea, it meant that I was hungry, and so I would always try to cover my mouth if I went out in the morning or something early, because they would say, "Oh, kagat nedio," and I'd say, "No, nagat node, nagat node. I'm not. My stomach isn't burning. I'm not hungry." But that was the first thing they associated with. And too, that if you yawn, like in our culture, in American culture, we may open our mouth wide. In many cultures, that's offensive, especially in Asian. You want to make sure you cover your mouth, and you'll a lot of times see, if you go to an Asian restaurant or whatever, like that, some sort of restaurant, they'll from Asia, they will cover their mouth if they're picking their teeth with a toothpick, and just to hide all that. So that's considered offensive, to kind of show your teeth to people. And then, of course, gestures and how we use gestures. If we do the thumbs up or the OK sign, I think you've seen that from your reading and the different things that those can mean. And so you want to be careful with how you use gestures in different cultures. And not everything means the same thing. So it's really interesting how body language is viewed in different cultures, and just to be aware of it. Next area to talk about is clothing and colors of clothes that we wear and types of clothes. So in color, it communicates something, doesn't it, as a nonverbal cue. If we're wearing bright colors, then we're very, happy, maybe going to a party or a festive a mood. If we're wearing something darker, it's maybe more formal. And obviously, if you're wearing black, all black, especially for women, a black dress with a black, lace, covering their face, or a hat or something like that, usually is a sign of mourning, and that's a pretty universal um, concept. Other than the other area would be maybe throwing dirt. In some cultures, they'll put dirt on their faces and rub it on their bodies as a sign of mourning. But types of clothing, we talked about a little bit with formal clothing that communicates something. It's a nonverbal cue. You're not going to a pool party with a tuxedo on. And casual would be more, hey, I'm just going out and having a good time. So, our dress communicates something. And versus recreational clothing versus mourning, and the different clothing that you would wear to a funeral versus going out to participate in a game or a pickup game or exercise outside or something would be obviously different, and those all communicate different things non-verbally. And the same would be true in other cultures. There's several examples from your reading, and you can probably think of some if you've been to different cultures and realize the difference. And some cultures may not have the ability or the convenience of having separate types of clothes, but you will see even when we were in Papua New Guinea that they would have saved their best clothes for a very important event, and they would not wear those all the time, where we may wear a dress shirt or something in a casual situation in the West. Many of these other cultures will keep back their nicer things for those events that are very more formal and important. But these are good things to keep aware of as well. Keep in mind how clothing is viewed and used in different cultures. This area here is really interesting, the different views of time from the east to the west. We refer to it really in the west as a commodity, where in the east it's more from a holistic or circular viewpoint, in that it's something that's doesn't control or run our lives. I know when we were living in New Guinea, I used to wear a watch, and they called it the Zagaya Budage, which was the eye of the sun. The tribal people did, and they used to tell me, how come that little piece on your wrist tells you what you have to do and when you have to do it? If we're hungry, we'll eat. If we want to go somewhere, we'll go there now, and whenever we feel like it, just kind of do our own thing. And so we refer to it in the West, though, as a commodity. Time is money. We save time, spend time, use time wisely, don't waste time, make time, take your time. In the East and in some of these other cultures, like for the Middle East, for example, from the reading from their textbook, they talked about a business meeting, and people from the West were there, as well as some Arab companies, and socializing during the meetings was frustrating to the Westerners because they thought, well, the work's valued more. And the thing is that socializing during that time and working is more valued, because for folks from those cultures, the business is going to happen because we have a good relationship with you. And so it's a totally different mindset of looking at how the West does. So it's more relational, more holistic, everything kind of fitting together. Something you really want to consider when you go to a different culture. It can be frustrating at first, but if you just accept it, I mean, it can be kind of nice. But if you're on a schedule and you have a certain amount of things that gets done, and you're accountable to a Western or company or whatever, you really have to be careful to pace yourself and to make sure you're able to get your work done. But then also realizing that relationships are very, very critical, and that's one of the things I probably gained the most from my time in New Guinea was how important relationships are and the value to put on relationships versus just getting things done to have things done. So I hope we can take the best out of both of these areas, these different views of time, and not allow one to kind of over step its boundaries, because if we don't have an agenda, things may not get done. And this is something we're going to talk about in the next presentations coming up. Some cultures really don't even consider goal setting, and that sounds crazy to us, but it's just a different way to look at things. Those of us from the West can't even conceive of that idea, but these things kind of can just help us gain a real appreciation and a better attitude towards working with those from a different culture. All right, the last area we'll talk about in this discussion is personal space. We'll look at contact cultures versus non-contact cultures. And contact cultures, people stand closer together while talking. Non-contact cultures, people stand farther apart while talking. Contact cultures engage in more eye contact. Non-contact cultures maintain less eye contact. Contact cultures, they'll use face-to-face body orientations more often while talking, and they touch more frequently, especially, like I said on the earlier slide, amongst the same sex, and it's not in a homosexual way or anything, but just that's just how it's touch is considered in contact. And contact cultures may speak in louder voices. The non-contact would touch less frequently and kind of not be very comfortable with that, and really want their own space, their personal space. I remember when we lived in New Guinea, and there was very, very few areas where the people would be alone. And I remember when I was building my house in the village, the people, some of the men came up and spent the night with me, and I said, well, I'm fine, I can stay here all right. They said, oh no, we don't want you to be alone, we want you to go crazy, we want your mind to wander. And so they were looking after me that way. So it's just different views of even personal space, and so just being aware of that is critical for our intercultural education and sensitivity as we work with others from different cultures. I look forward to discussing the next topic with you in the next lecture.